I hear Obed comment like, I respect Messi, but I want to beat Messi. And then I see what happens in the aftermath of the Seattle Sounders beating in League's Cup Inter Miami and how he conducts himself.
The way Obed handled himself in that moment, I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah.
He was respeto, trying to stay away, but, Suárez was trying to get under. Messi was talking to him. Everybody was going around him because those senior players knew that the kid wasn't going to back down. And sometimes we as older players, you later in my career, when a young, hungry kid maybe got the best of you, you didn't like that feeling as a senior player, as an older player. And so I thought Obed in that game did a great job, and certainly the squad in general, that was obviously the highlight of our year so far.
This is Vamos, presented by Michelob Ultra Superior Light Beer, and I'm your host, Luis Gomez.
This week we have a person who I had the pleasure to share moments with in my career as a footballer in Seattle. We recorded this interview a couple weeks ago with the manager who's been with the Seattle Sounders full-time since 2016. He's had the distinct pleasure and experience of what it feels like to be an MLS Cup champion, and had the pleasure of managing the Seattle Sounders in not one, but 2 Club World Cups. And before diving into this interview, we want to give a huge thanks to Bank of America, the official bank of U.S. Soccer, and the FIFA World Cup 2026 for supporting Men in Blazers Media Network. Discover what's possible in sports and in life. What would you like the power to do? And with no further ado, with us, Mr. Seattle Sounder, Brian Schmetzer. Brian, how you doing, my man?
Herc, I'm doing fantastic.
Just before we start, have you read all those books?
My wife is an avid reader.
Okay.
She consumes 3 books a week.
Wow.
It's a little bit of my room, but it's mostly hers.
I'm married. I know the deal. What soccer ball is that you have there? Just out of curiosity.
It's the 100th win. So all the players, this was a ball that was given to me on my 100th MLS victory.
Wow. You have a wealth of knowledge, my friend. You were born back in Seattle in August of 1962 and grew up in the Sounders system, both as a player, NASL, as a coach in the A-League, as an assistant coach in Major League Soccer, and then you became a head coach, and you're one of the most successful coaches in the history of American soccer, in the history of Major League Soccer. I want to know, first off, how you became a Sounder. How does that come about? And I'm sorry, excuse my ignorance, but what position did you play? I feel like I don't know enough about you as a player.
Before we actually start the soccer stuff, I do want to thank you because I've seen you on social media, on all your platforms. You've been a big supporter of mine, so I appreciate that. My story started off pretty humbly. So my dad coached our team. We're called the Lake City Hawks. We're in a little suburb of Seattle. And there was this kid on the team by the name of Freddie Hamill, and he was the best player on our team by far. And I'm playing left midfield, and I take the ball inside on my right foot, my much weaker foot, and I hit the ball, and it goes sailing into the upper corner. And that moment in time was the only reason why I got signed, because they were scouting Freddie Hamill, my good friend and the best player on our youth team.
You're a 17-year-old who got drafted by the Seattle Sounders. Now, I played for the Seattle Sounders in the A-League briefly and in Major League Soccer. I cover American soccer. I've seen how big the Sounders are today. What was Seattle soccer? What were the Seattle Sounders like back then in the NASL?
It was big. There were 30,000 people in the Kingdom. The first event in the Kingdom was the Cosmos playing.
Oh, wow. Pelé's Cosmos.
Yeah, I think it was like 1976. But I was in the stands in that game watching Pelé. And so, we drew good crowds. Even, look, the NASL folded, 83, 84, somewhere in there. And crowds started to diminish a little bit. 79, 80, very successful years of the team. We went to Soccer Bowl in 82. We were drawing 20, 25, 30,000 people for games.
So our younger viewers know the Soccer Bowl is the equivalent of MLS Cup.
MLS Cup, yeah.
So, okay, I kind of see you as a culture guy. Like, that's the one great thing I like about Brian Schmetzer's teams. There's a culture to it. And it seems like culture talk, those are buzzwords now in U.S. soccer with Mauricio Pochettino and whatnot. But how much of these old Seattle Sounders, how much of the NASL Seattle Sounders, of the A-League Seattle Sounders, of maybe the first year Major League Soccer Seattle Sounders do you implement in your culture today?
A lot. A lot of it. Yeah, culture can be thrown around in a bunch of different ways, Herc. My version of culture kind of culminates in a couple of areas, probably two big ones that I'll talk about. So number one, up here in the Northwest, I mean, it's pouring down rain right now. Well, people up here in the Northwest, we don't care. I mean, we're
Right.
tough. We are grit, and it's determination and overcoming adversity. And, that's just part of what I think. The Boys in the Boat is a great book. I didn't like the movie, of course. It, didn't really follow everything, but the book is a great book. It might even be on one of those shelves. But Boys in the Boat talks about overcoming adversity and Pacific Northwest grit. And so that's one of the key tenets of my culture is this isn't an easy sport. It's hard to win away from home in MLS. It's hard to win in MLS anyway because it's a parity league. It's hard to win Leagues Cup games against Lionel Messi. It's hard to win games against, Botafogo and Madrid and Paris. I mean, it's never easy, but we have great jobs. And so you take hard work and perseverance and overcoming adversity, and you meld that with this is such a good job, and your career is only like this much.
The shelf life. Yeah.
You have to take every single moment of your professional career, if you're lucky enough to have one, and do everything humanly possible to help the group be successful. That is my culture. It stemmed with, I laugh with Steve Zakawani sometimes, because Steve was, the number one draft pick. And this was even when Ziggy was a head coach. And he was such a great attacking player, fast, left winger, all that sort of stuff. Well, the first time I sat down with him, I was like going, hey, Steve, how's your defending? How are you going to defend in these areas? Because, we have to work on some of that stuff because we needed everybody to defend. It's not just, the guys at the back. It's the whole team. It's the whole squad. And so getting people to buy into that, Herc, sometimes is a challenge, but it's part of our culture. I mean, everybody has to defend in their own way. I mean, look, Raul Ruidiaz defends differently than Jordan Morris. They defend differently, but they each had jobs to do. And so, that culture is based on hard work, and it's also based on everybody understanding that the collective and the work you do as a collective is the best chance of you having success.
How important is that to you, the representation of a team to its community? Because I see this in other places. The way you speak about Seattle and the grit and the blue-collar worker there, you can see it being represented in the way you guys play. I see other places around the world where that is reflective. Other sports where that is reflective. The Pittsburgh Steelers, saying, that kind of thing. I don't see many Major League Soccer teams that are the same way, that operate the same way. How important is that to you?
A lot of our coaching is just saying things in a different way, a different fashion, a different time. There's lots of things. Steve Cherundle, I love him. I love talking to him off the field. He's a great guy, and he was a defender, and he's pretty hard-nosed about certain things and work and all that. But look who he's got on his team. He's got Son, he's got Bawanga, so he can play a little differently. I have to, with my group, I gotta, get that collective together and really have those players buy into it.
So obviously the team has been very successful. I'm going to take you to 2016. Siggy Schmidt, may he rest in peace, is the head coach. I was part of that team. It wasn't the easiest of starts that year. And somewhere along the lines, and I remember this vividly because I started working in media literally that week, we had an Eastern Conference trip, if you will. The Seattle Sounders, I believe we played the New England Revolution, and then we played DC United, and then we went on Copa America break in 2016. Right before that was Kansas City, and we got pummeled in Kansas City. It was one of the most miserable games I've ever been part of. It was like 90-something% humidity, 100 degrees. It was one of those soccer Saturday type of games. It was just a brutal stretch. We lost. Siggy was let go. He was fired. First time that Garth had ever made a coaching change. First time the Seattle Sounders had ever made a coaching change. You were named interim coach. We had some signings like Nico Lodero who came in, but the team went on a run. And the team ended up winning. You were named the head coach. That, to me, was a parting of the waters for the Seattle Sounders in Major League Soccer. And I want to give the Seattle Sounders of NASL and Seattle Sounders of the A-League their own time and place, their own respect that I think they extremely deserve. But in terms of Major League Soccer, that was a watershed moment for the Seattle Sounders. Why have the Seattle Sounders been so successful since then?
Because I had a great teacher. I mean, I learned a lot from Zig. Look, I was a pretty successful USL coach, but the best career path I could have had or chosen or just been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time was having Zig come. And, there was some, moments where early on he was like, okay, Brian, how do you think? What do you think? We had to get a relationship together because he really didn't know me. It was, Adrian was saying, hey, Zig, you got to look at Brian. It was kind of, part of the package. We all just formed this really good coaching staff early on with Zig's guidance. And, we started going. You fast forward to 2016. So I had 7 years of a runway, which, again, like I said, I learned a ton. So when I came in 2016, I thought I was ready, Herc, and I thought I, had some conversations with Ivanchitz and with Nelson and some of those guys and Ozzy and all the best players that, all the team, the guys that we had on the team. But it was still a learning curve. Some of those first games, I was a little nervous, I had to deal with, some big names. I mean, Clint, let's talk about Clint. I mean, my first job. And Clint, he had that heart problem in 2016, but he played in those first, I think it was 3 or 4 games that kind of got me going. I knew I had a draw against Bruce and the Galaxy my first game, and then we won like 2 or 3 in a row. And
We
then
did.
Clint had the heart thing, and
He dropped a
the
hat
team
trick against Orlando with that heart thing.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, good memory. And so he helped us. He helped me, but it was Ozzy. Again, you as a senior guy. I mean, the whole team was senior players,
I
and
forgot
we had an
about.
experienced group, and I had to just manage people. It was almost like I could throw the ball out there, and you guys kind of did all the work because you guys all had the experiences, but I had to manage and try and get the group together. And the best thing that I did, Clint was a captain, Brad was a captain. We had captain, we had a bunch of captains on the team, but I knew deep down inside that Ozzy was the captain. He was going to be my captain. And when I gave Ozzy the armband, he was like, okay, this is it. We're going to go. Come on. Hey, let's go. And, history was written.
Ozzy Alonso, one of the a friend of the podcast, one of my very good friends. I know Ozzy's story, and I've had nights with Ozzy with family members and friends, and he tells me where he's from and how he got to the country and what the Sounders have meant to him. And it's no, if you know Ozzy and how he played Major League Soccer, most don't know, but he played on one leg. Like he really shouldn't have played. And the fact that he played just is a testament to, how much he wanted it. But there were so many players on that team that wanted it. I've been on few teams where there was such a veteran presence and an accountability, but it's really because you empowered these players. You had them own the locker room in a way which few managers actually do, which leads me to my next question is, as a manager, how delicate is that line of allowing players to own the locker room, of allowing players to feel that accountability? Because most coaches, well, they want the power. They want the management responsibility.
Some might. I'm not wired that way, Herc. I mean, you know me. You were in some of those locker room situations when stuff hit the fan or stuff happened. I can play the heavy if I need to. I'd rather, like, if there was a dust up between players, I'd rather the players deal with it themselves. If I have to step in because it's a distraction, I can do that. Look, I forgot to mention Ramon Torres.
Oh, Roman.
I mean, I had to look up at him. I had to look up like this, and here's Ramon looking at me like this, and I'm, back and forth, and some of those things. There were certainly some interesting moments in managing, but again, to me, the job of a manager is getting the players to number one, play to their own individual potential. That's number one. And then number two, having them play together as a collective. And if I can get you or Roman or Ivan Schitz or Ozzy or Nico, I mean, I didn't have to do much with Nico. I mean, he was a tremendous talent, but getting you guys to play and enjoy what you're doing and all that other sort of stuff, and then get you guys to play together, that I think is my strength.
So I had a difficult moment with Sigi Schmidt when I was a player of the LA Galaxy. He actually cut me from the team, and he told me that I wasn't ready to be a professional footballer. And I was a young kid. I must have been 19, 20 years old, I believe. And, I was devastated. I thought my career was over. And for the longest time, I would use Siggy as motivation for me anywhere I was, like I'm going to
show him.
Exactly. Years go by. I became a national team player. I played against the Seattle Sounders, and every time I played against the Sounders, I wanted to hurt the Sounders. CONCACAF Champions League when we were Santos, and I did, yes, and I did. I just always had that chip on my shoulder when it came to the Seattle Sounders, and then I came with the national team to Seattle, and Siggy spoke to me. And we had a good conversation and a human conversation, and Siggy and the Sounders expressed interest in bringing me over. I felt like vindicated in a way, and I felt like really close to Siggy for that human moment of him like, hey, I'd love to bring you in. Like, I may have been, in that moment, you weren't the player. I can't say that he thought he was wrong, because in that moment, I wasn't the player. And I think that's fair to say. But he valued me as a player then, and he wanted to bring me in when I was at the height. I'm curious if Danny Masovsky, who's a Henderson boy, Las Vegas boy, for example.
Okay.
Is there a player like that maybe in the A-League or maybe in early Major League Soccer years, you're like, we could have done more with this player. I wish maybe things would have been different.
I've had to have some challenging conversations with Danny because, look, he scored 14, 15 goals. Jordan comes back from injury, and I got to talk to Masovsky. I got to say, hey, Danny, look, I mean, you've been scoring all these goals, but, I think Jordan still might be useful, might be better than you. How do you phrase that term?
Okay.
How do you say to Danny Masovsky, I believe Jordan is better? And, do you sugarcoat it? Do you say it right out front? Do you try and work it into a paragraph or a sentence?
Does it matter who the player is? Like, for example, Danny's temperament, Danny's confidence. Okay, yes.
For sure. With Danny, I had to tread a little bit more carefully. I had a similar experience with Alex Roldan, because we at the time, Garth and myself, I was coach, he was general manager, and we had made a decision that, Alex wasn't going to be with the squad for the following year. And we were going to let him go try and find another team, or I told him, I said, look, Alex, you have a chance. I mean, look, I'll bring you back in preseason, and if you earn a spot on the team, we'll re-sign you again. And it was a tough conversation for Alex to hear. And he had his big brother that was, getting some accolades and all that sort of stuff. And Alex plays with a chip on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And guess what? After that experience, he found a position that he could attach himself to a right back, because we're kind of playing him up a line in midfield and in the middle of the park. But once he, figured out that, hey, I've got to figure this out, he has been lights out as a right back for our squad. And it was the same kind of story that you had. He had to work his way back up. And now look at him. He's a tremendous success story.
He's been doing extremely well. Taking me back to Obed Vargas. It's being reported, and by the time this podcast comes out, that Obed has been called up to the full Mexican national team. Not a U20 team, the full Mexican national team. This doesn't happen, A, for young players in Mexico, and B, for Mexican-American young players. There's seems to be a bias in Mexico with this. So he's overcome that, and he's a player that I think has truly deserved all the accolades that have come his way. Talk to me about Obed and the growth of Obed, who he was when he came to the Sounders, and what you see this 20-year-old prospect becoming.
We're super proud of him, number one, about being called up to the full national team, because you're right. That is a challenge for any young player. You know more about the Mexican situation than I do, but I hear bits and pieces. Yes, he's done well, but really to get a call up with the first team, that's a big deal. How he did it, what did we see in the 15-year-old Obed Vargas that played against Austin FC, that game where, we win 1-0. I start 5 teenagers. Raul scores that unbelievable golazo that only Raul
I
could
called that
score.
game on ESPN Deportes.
Did you really?
Reed Baker
That was
White. Yeah. I remember all the kids.
Such a good game. That was such a satisfying game for us as coaches, because we rolled out those teenagers. I started João Paulo. So João Paulo was the father figure to all these young kids. And then Obed in that game was able to compete physically. This is the starting point, as a 15-year-old kid against grown men. And so there was a time when he was 17, 18 that he had some back issues because, there was some premature, damage, or, he had some challenges there. But physically, Herc, you look at his, GPS data in games, covers a lot of ground, most on the team. He and Cristian, he's usually number one. Christian's right behind him. His high-speed running is good. His ability to, accel and decel and wiggle out of things and everything. So number one, he's a tremendous athlete, okay? Not pure sprinter speed, but he can dribble with the ball at speed very well. So good athlete, number one. That's what we saw. A kid that was mature. He'd filled into his body. He'd hit puberty earlier than most 15-year-olds, right? Second of all, his determination. And this is what really grew on me, because I like the grit and the determination and all that. But he loved competing in every single small-sided game, every large-sided game, every scrimmage. Every time there was competition, Obed was like tuned in. He was like eyes like this and ready for the fight. So he has that determination. And then the last part that has come, and we're starting to see it now a little bit more, because look, playing in that part of the field, you have to be clean technically. And I think he can still get better. And where he wants to play or where he's going to play, he has to be a little bit cleaner. He still, gives the ball away 1 or 2 times a game in different spots. He's got some room to grow still, and he's coachable. I'm going to give my good friend Preki, I'm going to give him some accolades here, because we've worked really hard on playing through the middle and playing through the 2 pivots. And Obed and Preki have a really good relationship. And Preki, he doesn't mix words. I mean, he'll tell you straight up exactly what you might not want to hear. And Obed has big enough shoulders to take that as information, as stuff he needs to think about. And he can push back with Prek sometimes. He'll say, well, maybe I see this. And so they've done a good job together. And, he's had a good mentor in João Paulo, and he's got a great partner now with Cristian. So the kid's got a bright future.
I've been very impressed with his mentality. Obviously, Messi is Messi, and he's going to garner a lot of the attention in this league. But I can't tell you how many times I've, from my vantage point in the media, have watched the game, an important game, and Messi beats players, humiliates players on the field respectively, I mean. And then there's a line of players forming to ask for his jersey, for him to sign their jerseys after they've just lost a semifinal or a final, whatever the case may be. And I hear Obed comment like, I respect Messi, but I want to beat Messi. And then I see what happens in the aftermath of the Seattle Sounders beating in League's Cup Inter Miami, and how he conducts himself, not just in that moment, but throughout the game. And this is a 19, 20-year-old kid
who's handling himself so well in this moment. That's what I came away with that really impressed me. In this league, there are players who let the Busquets, the Luis Suárez, the Messis of the world not get under their skin, but absolutely intimidate them. And he wasn't intimidated.
He does have respect for those guys. I do want to mention that because look, that was an ugly part of that game.
Yeah.
What happened after the game, I tried to frame it as with my players. I tried to frame it as, look, take that as a compliment because you guys kind of got under their skin, made them angry towards the end of the game. But I also want them to win respectfully too.
Yes.
So, the way Obed handled himself in that moment, I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah.
He was respeto, trying to stay away, but Suárez was trying to get under. Messi was talking to him. Everybody was going around him because those senior players knew that the kid wasn't going to back down. And sometimes we as older players, you later in my career, when a young, hungry kid maybe got the best of you, you didn't like that feeling as a senior player, as an older player. And so I thought Obed in that game did a great job, and certainly the squad in general, that was obviously the highlight of our year so far.
I couldn't agree more with Obed, and it's happy to see him progressing, and I'm very excited to see what comes next for him. The next guy I want to talk to you about is Cristian Roldan. You've mentioned Cristian. I don't want to talk about Cristian's game. I feel like it speaks for itself. Best 11 in Major League Soccer, a consistent player every year with the Seattle Sounders. The Athletic does their anonymous surveys every year. He comes up as, one of the most underappreciated players or one of the gems every single year for GMs, for players. He's highly respected within the league. But when it comes to the national team, with some pundits and maybe some fans, he's a bit of a lightning rod. He's not as valued. I don't want to ask you for your opinion on that. I want to ask you who knows Cristian Roldan and has seen him day in and day out, drafted him. What does that make you feel?
Well, it certainly vindicates our choice of running around on draft day, getting Garth to run around to 8 different teams because he dropped out of the top 5 because he had a terrible performance at the combine. But we knew, me and Kurt Schmidt, I'll give Kurt some credit because we scouted him at the UW. I used to go watch him train, and we made Ziggy and Garth say, we got to sign this kid. It makes me proud as a Sounder guy that we could pick a good soccer player. We made the right choice there. But Herc, as a human being, as a person, the family, the mom and the dad and the 3 brothers, and now Alex has a baby and Cristian has a baby. It's like your kids are growing up. Your own, I got adult kids that are in their 30s.
Yeah.
And it's like you're watching these really beautiful young people have lives of their own, kids of their own. It makes me super proud.
Yeah. What about the reaction from some fans? The negative reaction to that,
Well, look, I mean, in our sport, unfortunately, there's a lot of negativity and there's some positivity, but then something happens and there's more negativity. And then, Brian's the best coach, we win Leagues Cup, but then 2 weeks later we go, we draw the Galaxy, we lose in Miami on a Tuesday, and we end up losing the week in Austin. And all of a sudden Brian should be fired. I mean, that's all part of the gig, but the national team does seem to zero in on Cristian, or Jordan has, really, stoked some of the fire on some of the national team people. And I always say this about social media. There are fans that, look, if they're buying a ticket or they're supporting the team, they can voice their opinions. But I think it's too easy on social media to always go to the dark side. It's way too easy. If people have well thought out criticism, then look, I'm okay with it. But if they just say, Roldan missed 1 pass and he's dog poop, it's like, it's a stupid comment. It's like, he's never good enough for the national team. Well, actually, you know what? This year he played against Botafogo, Atlético Madrid, and Paris, and Cristian didn't look lost in those games. Actually, he was one of the better players against those three teams. So why doesn't current form, which ebbs and flows with every player, why can't people say, you know what, Christian's a good player, good MLS player. His career's been all in MLS, and yeah, he's underappreciated, but he's in a good run of form right now. So let's pick the players that are in form in the summer for the World Cup, the biggest sporting event in the world. Let's get the American players that want to be there, deserve to be there, and are in form.
I want to ask you about the Club World Cup, Brian, because
Okay.
you just mentioned these teams. It's not the first Club World Cup the Seattle Sounders have played in. You guys played in the first Club World Cup for a Major League Soccer team in its history. You were rewarded with a second Club World Cup in the United States. Actually, the games were in Seattle, and the group of death. It's what it is. The Seattle Sounders, who are a traditional mainstay in North American football, very well known in a lot of different circles. You have PSG, European champions. You have Botafogo, who won Libertadores. And you have Atlético, who is a very, very difficult team in any tournament. I don't care who you are. You don't want to see Atlético. It's just a difficult team. Regardless of their moment, they're a very difficult team. Talk to me about how complex it is for you as a coach to face the Luis Enriquez of the world, the Cholo Simeones of the world. How difficult is it for you to face these teams, given Major League Soccer's limitations and what I would say is self-imposed, and they handcuff themselves?
I'll tackle this question in two ways. Number one, as a coach, it was pretty easy for me to coach the team that I have. Because the motivation factor was there. I could just say, look, we're the underdogs. We don't, let's just go out and play. And we had tactics. We scouted, the teams and did our normal routine. And look, Simeone and Luis Enrique and they were all very positive with me after the games. They thought the team was a good team, and I took that as a big compliment. But I think your question is asking, MLS compared to some of those teams. And even Botafogo spends a lot of money. How do we compete against them, Herc? Well, I don't know. Look, MLS has to change if we want to compete against them, because look,
what does changing mean?
Well, changing means, it means paying more money and
Salary
getting the
cap.
Players up and in the salary cap. And the steady growth of our league has been smart. Look, let's be honest, because I lived through the NASL years.
Correct. Absolutely.
I've lived through the MISL years of indoor soccer when we used to fill, the sports arena down in San Diego with 20,000 people every game, and that faded out.
Yeah.
So look, and look, I'm talking maybe a little bit above my pay grade and out over my skis, because Don Garber and the guys that make decisions for MLS, it's way above my pay grade. But I think slow, steady growth, I'm okay with that. But I think that if we really want to be a top 5 or top 10 team in the world, or top 5 or best team in Americas, wherever they want to go with some of those slogans, I think we have to continue to grow at a decent rate, continue to pay more players, invest more money, and do more things. And, it's proven that America can support soccer. I think we've gotten to a point where, you look at the MLS and the growth it's had, then you're looking at the women's game and the explosive growth that they're getting as well. So I think Americans are kind of, getting used to soccer being in the, mainstay of American sports. So it just needs to continue to grow and lift and build and go from there.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think more money will inject more attention, not from the people in the States, but from better players around the world to come to Major League Soccer, which will then attract more attention from those casual viewers in the States. You've mentioned before on Seattle Sports Leader 93.3 KJR FM about the possibility of you, Brian Schmetzer, coaching the U.S. men's national team.
It was kind of an off-the-cuff comment because people were killing Greg, and I like Greg. I think Greg's a great coach. had a lot of interactions with him and stuff like that. And so I said, look, it's a great job. I mean, who wouldn't want that job? That was more what I meant. I mean, they'll never come after me. I'm kind of stuck here, and I've made my hay, and we're kind of here in Seattle. But look, if anybody did ask me, if somebody would, ask the question, of course I would take an interview. I mean, I still believe that the U.S. is the best country in the world. We're going to put a great team out there in 26. We've met Miguel D'Agostino, the assistant coach, has now come a couple of times. I love the way they're talking about how they're building the team and, stuff like that, the things that they hold true. It mimics what I kind of say about having that feeling, about having that passion, about that. That's what Americans should be doing. We should be proud. When you put that jersey on, I mean, nothing else matters. I'm going to cut off my right arm to sit there and play for this team and do whatever it takes to help the team win. That's how I feel about the national team, and that's how I feel about the Sounders too.
Do you feel we're in a point, and I see this in all sports, I consume a lot of different sports, NFL, NBA, baseball. It feels like when we come and talk about management, we're getting into an era where it's the PowerPoint coaching era. Like the only way to get through that door is to wow them with the X's and O's on a software platform and show them how innovative you can be. What does Brian Schmetzer feel about this new coaching, I guess, discourse around the world in sports?
I think you have to have some skill, some basic skill in those areas. I think you have to be a good manager of people, both below your players and above, managing, people above you as well. I think there's that little piece of it. But I am certainly old school, Herc. I mean, soccer, our sport, is about feeling. It's about, believing. It's about competing. There's too many things that are intangible in our sport, or you can't measure them. I should say you can't. There's just too much. Our sport is too live, too active. You can get certain things and ideas and stuff like that across, but you cannot replace a feeling with a statistic. I don't believe that. No chance.
There's no metric for heart. You said something, and it made me think of it, and it stuck with me this last 20, 25 minutes we've been talking, how difficult it is to win on the road, okay? In Major League Soccer, in world football, in other sports, it's just difficult to win on the road. The first time I won on the road as a Seattle Sounders, the Jingle Bells song was sang. Where did this come from? Whose idea was it? How was it implemented? And how long has it been going for?
It was Neil Megson and some of the guys in the 90s. I just continued the tradition. I don't know exactly if it was Neil or Bernie James or, even back when Al was coaching in 96, I believe it was, Alan Hinton. But it was just a song that they sung after away games to, just do some team bonding and do something silly. I mean, back in those days, we weren't getting paid enough money to be all serious about stuff. We were just out having fun. I mean, we were going to go play some soccer, win a couple of games, figure out where we're going to have a beer after the game, and things were just way different there. So the song has, been one of those traditions that we've kept because it is a good bonding moment.
It is.
For the club. And I know our social media channels have put some of the Jingle Bells stuff out there, but you see a lot of teams nowadays in big away games. They're all, in the locker room after the games and everything. Each club has a tradition, and ours just happens to be Jingle Bells.
Wrapping up this episode, we want to give a huge thanks to Bank of America, the official bank of U.S. Soccer, and the FIFA World Cup 2026 for supporting the Men in Blazers Media Network. Discover what's possible in sports and in life. What would you like the power to do?
You're Mr. Sounder to me. I can't think of anybody else who's going to be labeled Mr. Sounder who goes across so many different eras of one of the richest in history,
Yes, I am old, Herc.
No,
Yes, I am
but I
old.
mean this with the utmost respect. So my question to Brian Schmetzer, Mr. Sounder, is how do you want to be remembered by the Seattle Sounder fan base?
For me, Jimmy Gabriel, he was the first Mr. Sounder. Then we had Alan Hinton, who was, certainly very influential in the club. Then we've had big name players, Zig, players, all that sort of stuff. When I look back on my career, what I would like to have fans remember me for was that I put every single ounce of energy, thought, the heart, I can kiss the jersey if I was a player still, that I put everything into winning, of course, because that's what we do. It's pro sports, but also continue the traditions that we've had as far as, I always say it, that the Seattle Sounders is the relationship between the players and the fans. And that started way back in 1974. And there's a bunch of old highlights, black and white things of, guys handing out carnations and, guys that played for the team in the 70s, stayed in this area and built lives and families and kids that grew up being a Sounder. Jeff Hurst, I think he's the only player to score a hat trick in a World Cup final, played for the Sounders. And I have a photo of him in an old Kick magazine, a Game Day magazine, where he's out in his shorts, his socks are rolled down, he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's coaching kids in Renton Stadium, just these local kids that are being coached by a guy who scored a hat trick in a World Cup final. And that relationship between the fans and the players of this club is something that I hope my legacy continues, because I talk about it enough and I really believe it. Guys like Roger Levesque, Taylor Graham, Zach Scott, Danny Jackson from my era as a USL, the guys now that, the Christians and the Jordans and guys that stay here and make their lives here. That's what the Seattle Sounders, the club, is all about.
Brian Schmetzer, Mr. Sounder, thank you so much for being on Vamos. Really appreciate your time. What a wonderful talk. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Vamos, Men in Blazers.
This is Shooting Straight, presented by Camarena, the most awarded tequila. The MLS Conference Finals are here, and it feels like the script has already been written. Yes, 3 of the 4 teams, San Diego FC, Vancouver Whitecaps, and Inter Miami, have never won MLS Cup. NYCFC is the only past champion left, and that was in 2021. Odds say we're getting a brand new MLS Cup winner. But let's be honest, all roads lead through Miami. This feels like the year for Inter Miami and Lionel Messi. It has Last Dance vibes. The one trophy Messi hasn't lifted in Major League Soccer. And for Miami, a club built for this exact moment, it would finally validate the entire project. Add in the emotional weight, Busquets, Jordi Alba, maybe Luis Suárez, possibly their final run together. The West Coast is chaos. San Diego, an expansion team in year 1, 90 minutes away from MLS Cup. Vancouver just shocked LAFC and believes this is their destiny. But destiny usually has a leading man. So yes, 3 debutantes are chasing history, but it feels like Major League Soccer history is waiting for one person. It's waiting for Messi to claim it. This is Miami's year, unless somebody rewrites the script, and I'm just shooting it straight.